So what kinds of games do you actually play? Like in your off time, like you love film, do you tend to gravitate more towards film-like games like Heavy Rain or like you know, The Walking Dead, those kinds of things?
I think a little bit of everything, and that's really what I want to emphasize with the industry, is that there's no set rules for, oh, the game should be this or game should be that. We need a variety, you know, because I love going from something like The Last of Us, which I get a strong emotional connection to,
yeah, no kidding.
and it's a great story, and I love it. But then being able to do a smaller game like Limbo, you know, which is very abstract in its narrative, and it's a much shorter game, or Journey, you know, something like that, right? But then and so those have personality and have storytelling elements to them. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that probably the game that I got the most mileage out of is Burnout Revenge. You know, so a car racing game, which is zero story at all, right?
Burnout is an amazing franchise.
So I mean, it really comes down to I think we all like to dabble in something of everything. It's also important when writing for games to understand there are different kinds of players out there. You know, there are people who just like to explore. And you know, and that freedom to explore. There are other people who are very much about, you know, I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that, and accomplish each level. There are players who like to go online just to socialize, you know, huge MMOs and meet people, real people online. Then there's people who just like to kill. People who like to, you know, first-person shooters.
Dominate. So I've always kind of had this particular way of thinking about film, right? Because I like film. I went to film school. I still love film, although my taste has changed considerably. I actually find that I watch a lot fewer films now than I did when I was in film school. Maybe that's normal. But for my money, basically, film's primary method of connecting with an audience, because all art, you could argue, and obviously you can argue this as well, but you want to have some kind of experience, right? It's an experience, it's some kind of connection, and you know, that's fine. Film, the way that they accomplish that, and there are exceptions, but generally, certainly on a mass scale, is through empathy, right? Is through you empathizing with what's happening on screen. There is a very clear distinction. It's not happening to you. You're empathizing with a circumstance, right? And the films that have attempted to do that, what we call a second-person narrative, there is I forget the name of the film, that was all in first person entirely.
Right, like a film noir.
Yeah, but it was like, it was a film noir, it was like a murder mystery. There was a specific one in like the 30s, or maybe the 50s, I don't know. I don't know my film history.
A weird experiment, it didn't really work.
People really didn't like it, right? And so it's like, no, we're gonna have we're gonna have, you know, Bruce Willis, we're gonna have Tom Cruise go on this adventure.
More recently, by the way, Maniac, the horror film with Elijah Wood, is also in first person.
Really?
And you're in the point of view of the killer. The only time you ever see Elijah Wood is when he's looking at himself in the mirror. But anyways,
very interesting. Well, and this might change, right? I mean, who knows?
But I know what you're saying.
Well, so with games, oftentimes I think when games try to go in that direction too much, they hit a similar kind of dissonance that first-person film did. I think one of the actually big failings of Heavy Rain, it's an interesting experiment, but one of the ways that it kind of fell apart was because they had these multiple protagonists, and just the way the storyline worked, you were never really, you never really had to commit to, like, identifying with one of the characters. So the whole story was kind of at arm's length. And it's a good game. It's very interesting. But critically, it wasn't received that well, as opposed to a game like The Walking Dead or like The Last of Us, where generally this, you know, okay, you're this guy, and from here on out, now that we've established that, it's happening to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Heavy Rain has its followers, and you know, I think the game kind of split some critics. Some critics said we need, you know, more experimentations like this. Others felt like no, it's too much like a movie, etc. But you know, I think it's important to let people have the choice to experience whatever kind of game they want to. But getting back to the idea that, you know, your issue, you're saying you're not watching as many movies anymore, and that games are the most popular art form of the 21st century. You look at something like Grand Theft Auto 5, you know, the most successful entertainment product in history, right? And there's a reason. I think I meet a lot of young people who, when I introduce them to something like Star Wars or Indiana Jones, things that I obviously grew up with loving, they have an interesting reaction, which is like, yeah, it's good, but I don't get to do anything. Because they already have the equivalent, say, in Mass Effect or Uncharted, and they get to participate. They get to involve themselves. And it's really about this current kind of generation is very much a me generation.
Sure.
And not just in video games, actually. I've noticed that even with my film production students. I mean, I'll be showing them something like, a magnificent, like Akira Kurosawa's Ran, right?
Sure.
And we're looking at one of the most, just 5 minutes, just an epic battle scene. They've never seen it before, it's really impressive. And I notice one student will be on their phone. And I'll be like, So I kind of look over their shoulder just to see what they're looking at, and they're checking their Facebook friend requests.
Right.
And I'm like, it blows my mind, because I think, wow, so this is more interesting to you than this magnificent sequence from Kurosawa's Ran. And whether or not I disagree or how I feel personally, the relevant thing here is because this is about them. And the current sort of theme of our millennium is identity of self. We're living in the age of Facebook. We're living in the age where everybody wants to be a celebrity. Everybody wants to participate. So games really cater to that, saying, well, what can you do in that world? You get it all the time on news shows as well. It's like, tweet us your thoughts. What do you think? Pick your favorite thing. And part of me is like, God, dude, who the hell cares? Just, I want to hear the experts. I don't want to hear about, some 12-year-old kid has to say about, Akira Kurosawa. But anyways, that's me being mean. But,
but no, I mean, it is interesting. Like there was maybe previously, there was a value in authority, right? I want to hear, because even arguably film criticism, any actually art criticism is like a dying form, because why would I ever want to read your review if I can just go to Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes? Like I still, when I do see movies, literally, that is like, not classics, but like in theaters, I'll be like, oh, do you want to see it? Rotten Tomatoes. If it has under a certain score, then I'm not going to see it.
Right.
Right?
Well, yeah, Rotten Tomatoes has definitely become the critical force as it was back in the 70s and 80s with people like Pauline Kael and et cetera. The challenge is, it's both good and it's bad. I think the current situation we're in. It's good because we're allowing a lot of people growing up to participate and engage and have their own personalities emerge in the world through technology, which is a beautiful thing, which is an incredible thing. But the thing to keep in mind is if all they're ever interested in is what do I like, then they never really grow because they're never really challenged. It's like every now and then you have to challenge them with something that they may not like at first. Like, for example, I remember when I was a kid and I first heard John Coltrane, or jazz. I'm like, what is this? It's all messy. I can't find the rhythm, right?
Yeah.
But then, with a bit of education, a bit of, reading about it and listening to it more, I began to appreciate it. I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And now I absolutely adore it, right? So it's really about finding that balance between, yes, participate, engage, but there's value in the experts.
Yeah.
There's a value in the people who are the scholars and who have studied it, So yeah, this generation is very narcissistic. And I can't blame them though, because we're raised in this world of celebrity status and Facebook status. We're a product of our environment in that sense.
Well, it's interesting you actually bring up the example of Coltrane too, because one thing that's been happening recently with game players, arguably, and this is one interpretation, but it comes up a lot, is the idea that there's a resistance to the medium maturing. Right? When you think about music, jazz and classical and certain genres are known for being like, oh, they're advanced forms, both to play and to even appreciate. And there was a time when classical music was pop music, essentially.
Yeah.
But then that time was also where it could only be appreciated by very wealthy people. Now, classical music is not really part of the pop culture landscape in the same way, but music as a medium is more accessible than ever. So film's the same way. There used to be films like, what's the famous one? The
Gone with the
Bergman
Wind?
one. But the Bergman,
Seventh Seal?
Yeah, Seventh Seal,
okay,
right?
yeah,
It's a good
yeah.
example of a movie that I can imagine a lot of people of my generation having no interest in. Even Ren is an example, right? Is like, I love that movie. That was my first Criterion purchase.
Okay, cool.
Criterion Collection, not Criterion, the developer that made Burnout.
Sure. Yeah.
But you know, but it's been a while since I've seen that movie, and a lot of people of my generation haven't seen that movie. Would never think to watch that movie. Probably shouldn't. You know, if they
What?
wouldn't. Well, probably shouldn't if they're not going to enjoy it. Then it's like, all right, fine.
No, but that doesn't make any sense. That's like saying don't read any Shakespeare. You know?
Okay.
It's ridiculous. You have to study the classics. I mean, there's so much value in them, and the greatest works of art are the ones that require a bit of work. You know, when you read a Dostoevsky novel, you don't get everything instantly in the first few pages. But
Yeah.
when you struggle through a bit of the hard chapters, by the end of it, you're like, oh my God, this is the most rewarding experience I've ever had. You know?
Yeah.
There's a saying, it's a famous quote by Jan Svankmajer talking about Picasso.
Okay.
And he once said, any image grasped too quickly will not leave a lasting impression.
That's a good quote.
But to lead the eye through incomprehension and then to offer a resolution, that is insight. So to basically go from a place of not knowing, a place of a little bit confused, and then coming on, like realizing, oh my God, that's what it's really all about. Then you've grown, you've developed. And those are the greatest works of art, whether it's the first time you hear Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. You don't get everything in the first listening, right?
Sure.
But through your lifetime, that becomes one of the most remarkable pieces of music. And same with great painting, same with great literature, and I believe the same thing with games and movies.
Well, it's funny because like the biggest game right now, basically, is Minecraft. And Minecraft is the first example of a massively popular game that doesn't deliver instant gratification. Arguably, it's you know when you
you're right.
when you first start playing. You're just in like a field or whatever, and you have to go and do stuff at whatever pace you want, and the game will open up to you as you continue to explore it of your own volition.
It's fantastic. And likewise, I'm so excited about No Man's Sky.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that's going to be a similar concept. Basically, you're starting this universe, in the fringes of the universe, right? And all you know, there is a story in there. It's about getting to the center of the universe, and there's a lot of mystery about the center of the universe. But it's so much freedom, you know, and you can meet people, but who knows? You might be playing for a long time without meeting anyone. But there's tons of things to explore and species to discover. You know, I really think we're on the brink of something huge right now. Because not just with technology, you know, with VR, Oculus Rift, and all this stuff coming out, where what was once simple is going to suddenly become fresh again. So whether it's exploring a world like we used to do back in Myst, suddenly doing it through VR will be so exciting. Or taking, you know, a straightforward first-person shooter like Halo, but suddenly doing it through VR is kind of exciting. And it's the idea of freedom, and where was I going with this? I had a point.
Freedom, I don't know, volition. I don't know.
Oh yes, technology.
The idea of.
Yeah. When you write a script for a movie, if you want to write a great script, it takes a lot of work, right? To get one good script is really tough work. And with video games, in a sense, you've got 10 scripts to write. You know, there's a lot of work there. So that's partly, I think, why people have been struggling with narrative in video games, is because it's tough. It's really tough, you know. But I think it really comes down to young people who are passionate about both interaction and story and are willing to put in that time and that effort. And I see that with some of my students who are so smart and so excited and care. They want to make some kind of impact in the world. And these experiences, you know, are there to allow people to, again, the choice. It's kind of like, not just going in the internet, but eventually we'll kind of go into something like, there'll be a new platform, like Into Experience, Into Experience. And you just enter that and you go, what do you want to do here? Do you want to socialize? Do you want to be told a story? Do you want to go to a rock concert? Do you want to participate in a story? Do you want to create something? All of that is going to be there, but that's a lot of writing to do, a lot of work to do, So the potential for this art form is astronomical. And I think that is the future, but it does require a great deal of work.
And do you think as the video game medium matures, is there a risk that we'll forget, the lessons that we've learned from older media?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it all comes down to the human contact. We want to see ourselves in that world or on that screen or in that book. We want to see characters that we love and that we hate, a bit of humanity in there to connect with, and yeah, it's incredibly exciting what the future could hold.